You sued Twitter a number of years ago. You just made him pay you $10 million?
That's right. That's right.
That's right. That's
well,
right.
I sued from long before he had it.
Every once in a while, a man comes along who builds the future with his bare hands. A self-made genius, a free market warrior, a guy who looked at a bloated, wasteful government and said, I'll do it better, I'll do it cheaper, and I'll do it myself. And sometimes that man is standing on a mountain of your money the entire time. Ladies and gentlemen, the richest human being who has ever lived, the world's loudest critic of government spending, and, according to a Washington Post analysis, the single largest private beneficiary of it. This is that story. The story of how a man built an empire on at least 38 billion taxpayer dollars, spent years telling you the government was the enemy, and then took control of the government and started cutting everyone's contracts but his own. It's not a story about a rocket. It's a story about a receipt, 38 billion of them, and the question nobody in power wanted to ask out loud. But before we get to the contradiction, you have to understand the myth, because the myth was beautiful, and the myth almost worked. The legend goes like this. A boy from South Africa takes his PayPal fortune and bets all of it on two impossible companies. Electric cars nobody wanted, rockets that kept exploding. He risks everything. He gets to the brink of ruin, and through sheer will, he builds Tesla and SpaceX into titans. No handouts, no bailouts. Just genius. Half of that is true. He did bet everything. By late 2008, the man was nearly broke. 3 SpaceX rockets had failed in a row. Tesla was, in his own words, hemorrhaging money. He had told his own team he'd give the rocket 3 tries, and if it didn't reach orbit, that was it. The company was done. And then came the savior, and the savior was not Elon Musk. In December 2008, NASA handed SpaceX a lifeline. A $1.6 billion contract to fly cargo to the International Space Station. The people who actually study this industry don't hedge on what that money was. They call it the thing that saved the company from bankruptcy. That contract built the Falcon 9. That contract built everything that came after. Musk himself knew exactly what it meant. When NASA called to tell him he'd won, the famously stone-faced billionaire reportedly screamed, Days later, on Christmas Eve, a funding round closed that saved Tesla in the final hour. And in 2010, the US Energy Department handed Tesla a $465 million low-interest loan. That loan launched the Model S, the car that made Tesla. So let's be precise about the foundation. The self-made empire was, at its 2 most fragile moments, kept alive by government money. Not metaphorically, literally. The rockets and the cars that built the richest fortune in human history would not exist in a purely capitalist system. They'd have died in 2008. That's not an insult. Lots of great companies start with public money. That's kind of the point of public money. The problem isn't that he took it, the problem is what he started saying about the people who give it. Because as the empire grew, so did the persona. Musk became the patron saint of the anti-government internet. Regulators were dinosaurs. Bureaucrats were parasites. The free market was God, and he was its prophet. He railed against subsidies. He mocked government waste. He built an entire political identity on the idea that Washington takes your money and lights it on fire. And here's the part that makes the whole thing land. He kept taking the money the entire time. According to that Washington Post analysis, Musk's companies have pulled in at least $38 billion in government contracts, loans, subsidies, and tax credits over 20 years. SpaceX alone holds around $22 billion in federal contracts. By his own company, President's Count. NASA is its single biggest customer. The Defense Department is right behind. And Tesla, the free market crown jewel. The Post found Tesla collected $11.4 billion in regulatory credits, the kind designed to prop up electric vehicles. Without those credits, the analysis found, Tesla would have lost $700 million in 2020. Instead, it posted an $862 million profit. The line between profitable visionary and company that lost money that year was a government program. Here's the detail that should stop you cold. The Post found that nearly 2/3 of all that money came in just the last 5 years. In 2024 alone, federal and local governments committed at least $6.3 billion to his companies, the highest total ever recorded. So picture it. A man becomes the most powerful voice in America for cutting government spending at the exact moment government spending on him hits an all-time high. The crusade against the trough is being led by the animal eating the most out of it. For years, that was just an irony, an asterisk, a talking point. And then in 2025, the irony got the keys to the entire building. Enter the Department of Government Efficiency. A made-up agency with a meme for a name handed the authority to slash the federal government to pieces. And the man holding the axe was the same man with $38 billion in government money on the line. This was the moment the contradiction stopped being a joke and started being a question of who, exactly, was getting cut. Because here's how it's supposed to work. When you take a government job, you file financial disclosures. You list your conflicts. You recuse yourself from anything that touches your own wallet. That's not a courtesy. For most federal employees, the conflict of interest rules are criminal statutes. Musk was brought in as something called a special government employee, and according to multiple reports, he never filed public financial disclosures at all. The White House line was that Musk would simply police his own conflicts of interest. The richest man on Earth, with stakes in rockets, cars, satellites, brain implants, a social network, and an AI company, would be trusted to decide for himself which government cuts helped him. You can probably guess how that went. The watchdog group Public Citizen ran the numbers, and the number is the whole story. They found Musk had a direct business interest in more than 70% of the agencies and departments DOGE targeted. 70%. The man tasked with shrinking the government had a financial stake in the overwhelming majority of the places he was shrinking. And it wasn't random. Look at the pattern. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the agency that regulates car safety, the agency that had opened multiple investigations into Tesla's self-driving technology. It got hit with deep staff cuts, reportedly losing around 10% of its workforce. The National Labor Relations Board, which had active cases against SpaceX, including a charge over the firing of employees who criticized Musk. Its leadership was thrown into chaos. The Securities and Exchange Commission, which had gone after Musk over his Twitter purchase, buyouts and exits. The FDA. Reuters reported that workers fired in the DOGE cuts had been reviewing Musk's brain chip company, Neuralink. The USDA Inspector General's office, which had been looking into Neuralink's animal testing. Gone. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the agency that would regulate Musk's payment ambitions for X, targeted for the wood chipper. Are you seeing it? These aren't random cuts for efficiency. According to a 44-page memo from Democratic staff on a Senate investigations subcommittee, on the day of the inauguration, Musk and his companies were facing at least 65 actual or potential federal actions across 11 agencies. The estimated liability if those actions succeeded, $2.37 billion. The memo's accusation was blunt, that Musk's position let him, in their words, evade oversight and make litigation disappear. The White House rejected any claim that he used his role for personal gain. Now here's the other half of the pattern, the part that gives the whole thing away. Look at what didn't get cut. NASA, SpaceX's biggest customer, was largely spared the chainsaw that hit everyone else. The Defense Department, where SpaceX holds billions in contracts, was not a serious DOGE target. Bank of America's analysts even flagged it. DOGE's reported savings from defense contracts barely moved while everything else was being gutted. So let's lay it out flat. The agencies that pay Musk billions, protected. The agencies that investigate, regulate, and fine Musk, dismantled. He was, as Senator Gillibrand put it, an unelected billionaire with, in her words, no business anywhere near the Pentagon. And the head of Public Citizens Congress Watch said it should alarm every American that the world's richest man spent months tearing down the very agencies meant to regulate him. The crusade against waste had a remarkably consistent definition of waste. It meant everyone's contracts, just never his. But there was still one problem. To sell all of this, DOGE had to prove it was actually saving money. So they built a website. They called it the Wall of Receipts. And the Wall of Receipts is where the whole performance fell apart. DOGE posted what it claimed was documentation of billions saved by the cuts. It was supposed to be the proof, the transparency, the vindication. It was riddled with errors, and not small ones. CBS News reviewed it and found the accounting was overstated by billions. The crown jewel of the savings, a contract DOGE bragged about cutting for $8 billion. The real value of that contract? $8 million, a thousand-fold error. The New York Times caught it. That single mistake cut DOGE's own claimed savings nearly in half. NPR found new inaccurate entries even after old ones were corrected. The Project on Government Oversight said DOGE seemed more interested in inflating savings than reporting them accurately. Bank of America called the contract savings overstated. A senior fellow at the conservative-leaning American Enterprise Institute, no left-wing critic, estimated they were overstating contract values by a factor of 2. Then, it got embarrassing. When the press kept catching the errors, DOGE quietly deleted the 5 largest items off the wall of receipts. The Guardian reported it. The biggest savings the whole project was built on just vanished from the page. And somehow, with the 5 biggest items removed, the total savings number went up. Musk's response to all of this, at a cabinet meeting, was a shrug dressed up as humility. "We won't be perfect," he said, "but when we make mistakes, we'll fix it very quickly." The man who called it fraud and waste, the man tearing apart safety regulators and labor boards in the name of accuracy, running a savings tracker that confused 8 million for 8 billion, and quietly deleting the evidence when reporters showed up. This wasn't just hypocrisy anymore. This was the contradiction in full color. A self-described enemy of government waste who built his fortune on government money, now in charge of government cuts, sparing his own funders, gutting his own regulators, and unable to do the basic math on the savings he was using to justify all of it. And the contracts kept coming the whole time. Even as DOGE was canceling other people's deals, SpaceX kept winning. The companies that compete with Musk watched federal agencies that might have checked him lose their staff, their leadership, their teeth. So the gaming press of this story, the watchdogs and the senators and the reporters, started reaching the same place. They stopped asking whether there was a conflict of interest. They started asking how it was possibly legal. Senator Schiff wrote to the Government Ethics Office arguing Musk, as a federal employee, was subject to the Criminal Conflict of Interest statute. Later that same day, the head of that ethics office was removed. Inspectors General, the internal watchdogs whose entire job is catching exactly this kind of thing, were fired across the government. 17 of them, one reportedly escorted out of her office. Every institution designed to ask the question was being quietly disassembled by the man the question was about. Now, in fairness, here's the strongest version of his defense, because the story isn't honest without it. Musk's company president, Gwynne Shotwell, has said plainly that they earned every contract. They bid lowest, they delivered. And serving the country with great technology is not a crime. And she's right that it isn't. SpaceX genuinely is, by most measures, the best in the world at what it does. The government keeps hiring them because they keep winning. Musk has even, at times, called for ending the consumer EV tax credit, arguing his competitors need it more than Tesla does. The White House has flatly denied he ever used his government role for financial gain. None of the conflicts above have been proven in court to be a crime. These are allegations mapped by watchdogs and lawmakers, not a verdict. So hold both of these things at once, because that's the whole point. It can be true that SpaceX earns its contracts on merit, and it can also be true that the man who runs it spent years calling government spending the enemy while quietly becoming its biggest private recipient, then took power over that spending and aimed the cuts at everyone but himself. Both can be true, and when both are true, you don't get a villain. You get something more useful, you get a mirror, because the $38 billion was never really the lie. The money is documented. The contracts are public. The receipts, the real ones, exist. The lie was the story he sold on top of it. The story that he did it alone. The story that government money is what happens to other people, to the wasteful and the weak, while he stood apart from it, self-made, beholden to no one. That was the myth. And the myth required you to never look at the foundation. NASA saved SpaceX in 2008. The Energy Department launched the Model S. Regulatory credits were the difference between profit and loss in 2020. Taxpayers committed $6.3 billion to his companies in a single year. And then he stood in front of the country, called the government wasteful, and started cutting. The richest man who has ever lived is, by the Washington Post's own accounting, one of the most successful recipients of public money in American history. That's not the scandal. The scandal is that he spent a decade convincing you he was the opposite. So here's where it lands. Not on an accusation, on a question. If a free market really is the best system, the fairest system, the one Elon Musk has spent his life preaching about, then why did it need to be saved by your money in 2008? And if your money saved it, then what exactly was he cutting in 2025 and who was he protecting when he did? He has the receipts, 38 billion of them. He just never wanted you to read the name at the top. And the strangest part? The website that was supposed to prove him right is the thing that proved the whole story. The wall of receipts. Still up for now. Still missing its 5 biggest items. Still claiming savings nobody can fully verify. A wall built to show you where your money went. Built by the man it went to.